Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking an absolutely fascinating mystery that's been hiding right in plain sight within the global energy transition. It's the story of a celebrated, monumental climate victory that seemed to be going perfectly until it inexplicably stalled out and reversed course. If you want to understand the real-world friction of transitioning our global economy, well, you're definitely in the right place.
Think about it. Why would a massive company, one that is legally mandated, financially subsidized, and locally pressured to go green, suddenly backpedal on its most ambitious promises? We're going to explore this phenomenon that researchers are really just beginning to understand. It's a paradox where solving a local climate problem accidentally triggers a dormant global financial tripwire.
Okay, part one, a massive green paradox. To get to the bottom of this mystery, we've got to meet the main character of our story, the massive Shell Pernis refinery, located in the port of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. For over a century, this facility has literally been a beating heart of the European energy system, deeply embedded in the region's infrastructure and its economy. Now, to really wrap your head around the sheer scale of the challenge here, just listen to this number. 4.2 million. That is the amount of carbon dioxide in metric tons that the Pernis facility emitted in the year 2020 alone. It's an absolutely staggering amount of emissions coming from just one single location. To put that into perspective, those 4.2 million tons meant that the Shell Pernis facility accounted for roughly 16% of the Netherlands' entire national industrial emissions. Because it's so massive and so deeply entrenched in the regional economy, it serves as the absolute perfect case study for the energy transition. I mean, if you can turn Pernis green, you can theoretically turn anything green. But changing it is incredibly hard, and that's due to a powerful and visible academic concept.
Which brings us to part two. What is carbon lock-in? Let's break down exactly what this academic concept means and why it usually prevents massive established sites like Pernis from changing their ways. The formal definition we're looking at here is first-order carbon lock-in. Essentially, think of this as a localized, systemic resistance to change. It's the self-reinforcing inertia that traps incumbent firms in a cycle of fossil fuel dependency. You see, it's not just that a company doesn't want to change, it's that the entire system around them is uniquely designed to keep them doing exactly what they're already doing. Now, what's really interesting about this is how this trap is actually built. First-order lock-in has three dimensions that form this localized web. Technologically, you have massive, super expensive infrastructure that lasts for decades. You can't just throw it away. Institutionally, you've got local regulations and subsidies that heavily favor the status quo. And behaviorally, society just expects affordable liquid fuels to keep flowing. For decades, this invisible web kept Pernis locked in. Part 3. Breaking the local chains. So how do you break out of that? Let's look at how an unprecedented wave of coordinated, localized pressure hit the Netherlands, causing this whole web of lock-in to shatter. Just look at this rapid-fire timeline of interventions. In 2018, the European Union tightens its emissions trading system, making it incredibly expensive to emit carbon. Bam! In 2019, the Dutch Climate Agreement legally mandates massive industrial reductions. And then comes the real hammer blow in 2021, the landmark Milia Defensie versus Shell court ruling in The Hague. It ordered Shell to globally reduce its emissions by 45% by 2030. Aggressive public policy, legal rulings, and local investor pressure were all firing at once. So, forced to act, Shell actually responded with incredible enthusiasm. They committed massive capital to completely transform Pernis into a low-carbon energy and chemicals park. We're talking massive electrification, the Holland Hydrogen green hydrogen project, building a state-of-the-art advanced biofuels refinery, and integrating into the massive Porthos carbon capture network. It was, quite literally, a textbook response to escaping carbon lock-in. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact shift we just discussed. Over in time 1, on the left, you see the classical lock-in forces operating strictly within the localized EU-Dutch system. But move to time 2, on the right, and those specific local interventions, the pricing, the laws, the court rulings, they've successfully relaxed that first-order lock-in. Shell is actively investing in green tech. It looks like a massive win for the climate, right? Well, here is part 4, the global market backlash. And here's where we hit our major plot twist. Just as those local regulatory chains broke and Shell started pouring money into these green projects, a new, entirely different invisible force attacked the decarbonization plan. The core conflict boils down perfectly to what you're seeing here. On one side, you have the sustainability logic of the local Dutch and EU stakeholders who forced this change in the first place, prioritizing deep decarbonization. But on the other side, Shell is a multinational, publicly traded company. They answer to global financial markets operating on capitalist logic. These global value shareholders demand short-term returns and capital efficiency, and they fiercely penalize highly uncertain, long-term investments, which is exactly what these new green megaprojects were. Let's actually observe how this played out across the global market. Shell, operating in the strict EU-Dutch context, was pouring cash into low-return green projects, leading to a depressed short-term market valuation. Meanwhile, their competitors, U.S. oil majors and state-owned petrostates, were operating in entirely different regulatory environments. They faced much looser climate rules, kept investing in highly profitable short-cycle fossil fuels, and consequently enjoyed high market valuations. This created a massive, glaring valuation gap for Shell. So the absolute crucial point here is that this valuation gap is incredibly dangerous for a public company. Shell's depressed stock price left its management highly vulnerable. Global activist hedge funds started buying up shares, arguing that the green transition was literally destroying shareholder value and demanding the company be broken up. There was even the looming existential threat of a hostile takeover by entities facing zero climate scrutiny. Which brings us to part 5, second-order carbon lock-in. Facing this intense, borderless pressure from global financial markets, we reach the climax of our explainer. Shell was forced into a corner, having to retreat on its green promises simply to save its corporate autonomy. The corporate response? It was swift. Shell's CEO, Wael Sawan, explicitly stated that their investments must cover our cost of capital and make a return for our shareholders. The strategy abruptly pivoted to what they called profitable decarbonization. Essentially, if a green project couldn't immediately compete financially with a traditional fossil fuel project, it was immediately on the chopping block to appease the global market. And here is the tangible, real-world consequence of all those market pressures. Citing uncompetitive market conditions, Shell officially terminated its flagship advanced biofuels facility at Pernis. Major projects were paused, delayed, or outright canceled. The massive local green victory was, step by step, dismantled by the global market. Let's move to this next visual and see how this builds into the final academic reality. Look at time 3 on the left. The very moment Shell's massive green investments went public, it activated those global capitalist logics, lowering their asset valuations and triggering the threat of a takeover from competitors in less strict regions. By time 4 on the right, this macro-level global pressure literally crushed the local green initiatives, resulting in the delay and cancellation of decarbonization investments. This entire phenomenon actually has a name: second-order carbon lock-in. It's a dormant form of inertia. By successfully using local laws and courts to force a company to go green, stakeholders accidentally expose the firm to higher-order global financial pressures. Solving the local climate problem tripped an invisible global wire that snapped the company right back into fossil fuel dependency. So why does this matter for you and for our future? Well, it proves that local or even national climate policies alone are simply insufficient when dealing with massive multinational firms. If we push a company to transition locally, we can inadvertently trigger massive global financial penalties that kill the transition anyway. To successfully decarbonize in the future, we have to align national climate policies with global financial oversight. The rules of capital absolutely must match the rules of the climate. Which leaves us with this final, massive, unresolved paradox to ponder. Can local climate policies ever truly succeed if global financial markets relentlessly punish the pioneers who actually try to change? It's a tough question, but it's one that policymakers, investors, and honestly all of us will have to answer if we hope to navigate the true complexities of the energy transition. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.